Well, hello there, everybody. How are y'all doing? It is so good to see you all. Been away for a little while, but sometimes absence makes the heart more sweeter, I guess. I don't know, missing that. But anyway, thank you all, everyone in the chat room. Hey, David Barry, haven't seen you in a while, my friend. What's up? Well, all the rest of the moderators and everybody else, thank you for, being here. Speaking favor over us all, nothing missing, nothing broken. That's important. And I've had a good time of learning patience and endurance and, etc. So anyway, I have with me, I thought it was just really kind of special to have Ryder Lee back on, Raised by Giants. My brother, how are you doing?
How's it going, Wayne? How's everyone in the chat? Good to see everyone. Soul Tribe, what's happening?
Hey, oh,
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me on, Wayne. It's been a
cool.
minute since I've been on over here.
It
Appreciate it.
has been. Are you missing the snow? Because I know Gilbert's there in Denver. I know they're getting their asses kicked. Where I lived in Highlands Ranch, they're getting dumped on and not missing it a bit. So how about yourself up where you are at?
We got like nothing, which is really interesting. We got like a little dusting, like everywhere else around us just got like 15 inches, like over a foot, and like we just missed it. It was unbelievable. Everyone thought that it was going to be really bad. So everyone was at the grocery stores and everything late last night trying to stock up and everything. And then I was like, ah, it's probably not going to do anything. It kind of rained and fluttered when I was on my way to the gym last night. But then when I woke up this morning, nothing, nothing on the
Nothing.
ground. And I was like, wow, we dodged a bullet on that one because a lot of people, it's really bad. I just saw a video of like 15 inches, like a dog went outside and just sunk
Yeah.
right down to into the snow.
They're comparing this to, I think, the March storm in 2021, and we had 8 foot snow drifts in the backyard on that one.
Yeah, what did they call that? Snowpocalypse or something
Something
like
like
that.
that. I
Yeah.
mean, so we have friends that live right there in Ken Carroll, which is right up to the hogback, and they're catching hell. I mean, just, and I don't miss it at all. It was 82 degrees yesterday. I even got a suntan, so.
Wow, it's actually been a really strange winter, which we had a really strange summer too. Like it wasn't really hot at all. It rained like for 2 months straight, which was
Oh,
nice.
yeah.
Colorado needed the rain, but in the winter's been strange too. It's only snowed like once or twice here, which
Oh,
I think,
really? That's a
yeah, all
drought.
winter. Really strange, really,
Yeah.
really strange weather.
So, brother, I know when everyone in the last of the Soul Tribe, by the way, hello, everybody. Much love to all of y'all. Missed you. Uh, Super Galactic says winter was not as bad as I thought. Yeah. Yeah, it depends, I guess, where you are. I mean, you know, so much changing to the planet, the universe. But anyway, last we spoke, your father transcended, crossed over, and I was on with you as you got back. And last I heard, you and Jay were heading out to the West Coast.
Yeah, we did a little travel out there, filmed some footage for the documentary, filmed a few interviews for our second documentary, which is going to be on MK Ultra and Stanley Kubrick, because Jay is like a Stanley Kubrick expert. You know, he's the one that started the whole faking of the moon landing from the Shining movie. And not a lot of people know that because it's been regurgitated over and over and over
Hmm.
again, and people will post clips and then like really not give him credit. But he did that with his Kubrick's Odyssey films, and went up there to Laurel Canyon. Really strange area. That was the first time that I'd ever been out. I'd been to LA before, but never went up into Laurel Canyon or did any of that stuff. And it's kind of a dump. Kind of a dump.
It is. I mean,
And I'm like,
but
what are they doing? I thought this was supposed to be like prestigious actors and like prestigious filmmakers and all this, and it's like a dump up in there. But we got up to
did you
Lookout
go?
Mountain.
Go ahead, brother.
We got up to Lookout Mountain there, where Jared Leto owns that big house on top of the mountain, where he's supposedly like running like a cult out of the Lookout Mountain building, which I don't know anything about it. I have to look into it more to really understand, but that's what people are saying, that he's like running like a weird little cult out of it. But it's a huge, huge house. But overlooking LA up there at the top of Lookout Mountain is incredible.
Yeah.
Like we got up there, we got some really good shots of that. And just looking down over LA, I was like, wow. I could imagine what this was like in the 60s and the 70s, like probably way better, way nicer, but it's just gone downhill and downhill. The roads are bad. Like it's just a strange atmosphere now. I felt like that it was a lot happier and a lot more like gumption to it, and things were flowing nicely back then, but now it's just like a dumpster fire.
Yeah, the magic left, man. I mean, they sucked it all up. Uh, and of course, everyone, I don't know if people have seen the documentary Laurel Canyon, but the whole thing with Mama Cass buying the house, and it kind of reminded me of like Family Connection, because you never knew who was going to come in and come out. But these were all pioneers in, the unfolding of rock and roll. And I think they sucked it all dry. And when they left, everyone's just trying to build on on the memories of the of what happened there. But yeah,
Yeah, and like there wasn't any zero like attractive women too, which I thought was kind of strange as well. And like, what's going on here? Like I didn't see one attractive woman the entire time that I was in California. I was like, what is this? What's happening?
what
Not that that's
happened?
not that that's a requirement, but it was just like strange not to see really any attractive people. And I've really been like looking into like words and the double meanings of like words, and the double meanings of a lot of these buzzwords that are really used around the community, especially when it comes to ufology and stuff like that, like national security threat, alien invasion, crash retrieval, and things like that, because I believe that these words have double meanings, and the perception of what the people think that they mean, there's actually something under that. And I believe that a lot of these have multiple things. And like I've spoken about a few times on my show in the past, is that you can change the word alien just by adding one word in front of the word alien, and then it becomes a completely different word, right? You just add illegal in front of alien, and you get a completely different meaning. And you know how like people are always talking about, oh, they're always here, they've always been here, they're always around us. Well, you take illegal, put it before alien, then you really encompass what they're actually talking about, because they are here, they've always been here, they've always been around us, right? And it's the same with like national security threat. There's a double meaning to national security threat as well. Like it's not a national security threat because they're invading our airspace and invading you know, they're extraterrestrial and they're going to attack us. It's a national security threat because it's more than likely all of our technology. And if another country finds out that it's our technology, then we're exposed. That's the national security threat. And it's just been really interesting because there's a lot of things that are like that, and not only like with the words and the buzzwords, but it's also with like programs, right? Like official government programs as well, like the Stargate project. People said, "Oh, well, the Stargate project is, a time portal, like an actual real Stargate where people can go in and time travel and do all that stuff from like ancient mythology." And well, no, it was a actual government DIA Army intelligence program on the study of remote viewing and psychic phenomenon, used for a data collections intelligence operation.
do you
And
believe? And it's interesting. I had my notes here because we haven't even talked, but So the question that I have is, all right, understanding biological organisms, which we are, the elements of space itself, without a protective atmosphere, you're subjected to not, we don't even know what type of radiation. We have an idea of some of it. And then you have the whole thing with just the distance. So my question that I have is, do you, because you've been covering this on your channel, I've been watching that, and Gilbert, when you were talking about the ugly girls, I was thinking, well, what happened to Brian Wilson, the California girls? But anyway, so do you think, from what you have been able to ascertain to this point, that there are actual biological beings from other galaxies actually visiting Earth? I mean, because I, as I think about this more and more, I don't see that as being possible. You look at light, a light year is 5.8 trillion miles. All right. So even moving at the speed of light, depending on what your particular point of view, Einstein said that he said reaching the point of the speed of light is the problem, not after. He could probably go faster than that. Or are these beings, are they bending space? Are they do they have the ability to form bubbles in which they can go from dimension to dimension? Do they die? If they die, do they have a soul or a spirit? I mean, what have you have found out?
Well, that's normally what people say when you try to debunk the physical extraterrestrial hypothesis that they're coming here from other planets. They'll turn it and they'll say, "Oh, well, they're interdimensional or they're extra dimensional," or they'll even create a new name, hyper, ultra, extra dimensional, or
Yeah.
whatever, and but
Ultra
really
terrestrial.
ultra terrestrial. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
one. They
That's
do
one that was on
that.
the certifiles.
Yeah, so it's like it's there's always like an excuse whenever you start talking about the extraterrestrial narrative, and there's always something else that the true 100% believers throw into the pot and stir it up and mix it up. But whenever you look back through the real history of ufology, you just see all of the deception and all of the mis and disinformation surrounding UFOs. And it's not mis and disinformation in the way that we think that it's mis and disinformation. It's actually mis and disinformation in a deceptive way, encouraging the belief in extraterrestrials, not covering up extraterrestrials. And when you go back to the very first sighting of UFOs, well, I mean, people can argue all that they want that UFOs have been happening for thousands of years. They can read the Bible and, use the book of Ezekiel and say that that's a UFO, but they weren't called UFOs back then. Most people saw pillars in the sky or shields or,
The only picture of Yahweh is in what we would define today would be a craft that produced a field around, because apparently he can't exist in this realm, or this atmosphere. I don't know. And that's the other thing I have. How do beings, if they're on another planet, another galaxy, and they're coming here, are you telling me that there's uniformity in atmosphere and the gases that form atmospheres? What are the odds of that happening?
yeah, there's absolutely no way. If that's possible, then they would have to wear some sort of shielding protection. They would have to, you would never see their true form because they wouldn't be able to walk around in their true form because
Bingo.
the atmosphere is different, gravity is different, our sun is different from any of the other suns on any of the other planets. So it's really
As long as I don't
impossible.
have any kryptonite, I am fucking Superman, but it's all right.
That's right. They're actually making a new Superman movie. It got pushed back. J.J. Abrams, Legend of Superman Legends or
Yeah.
something like
Oh,
that. Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Not J.J. Abrams. shit. I don't know why I'm blanking on his name. It's really early, but the head of DC that
Oh,
James Gunn.
yeah.
James Gunn is directing it. But when you look back at the UFO sightings of like modern times, which Arrow just came out with a report 5 days ago that lists all of the different reports that they've investigated since 1947. And
Right before Blue Book
yeah,
and Roswell. I
yes,
guess Roswell would be the most current one after that.
yeah. And listing the explanations for what they were. And it's a really interesting document if people get the chance to check it out. But then people are like, "Oh well, the government's just covering up the extraterrestrial phenomenon," and I'm like, "No, they've been saying the exact same thing since '47. They've never changed their stance. They've never said that extraterrestrials exist." Now, the thing that they have said in in 2020 when that Pentagon report came out was that UFOs are real and UAPs are real, but they've never denied the existence of UFOs or UAPs. They've only said that it's not extraterrestrial and has nothing to do with extraterrestrials. So when you go back and look at the first modern sighting, which was with Kenneth Arnold
That's
in
in
19
Oregon, wasn't it? Or Washington, Washington
Wa-
State. Yeah.
Washington, yeah. Well, he had a few other sightings. One was in California, I believe. Another one was in Oregon, and then Idaho, I believe. I would have to pull up my notes. I'm just going off the top of my head, but uh, he had many sightings. Some say 8 to 11 sightings after his initial sightings that really no one talks about, but a lot of those could be lumped into a category of like natural phenomenon. And a lot of the people that talked to him after he would see these other sightings after 1947 would be like, oh, well, it's just ducks, it's just headlights and all that. So it didn't really get as much attention, but he did see things like every subsequent year up until like 60, no, it'd be 54 or something like that. And then there's like a 3 or 4 year break in there. And then he has a couple more sightings in the 70s and the late 50s. But when you look at his initial sightings at Mount Rainier, Washington in 1947, he seen a string of 9 objects. He said that they reflected sunlight and they didn't have any tails. So he landed his plane in Yakima, Washington, and told his friend Al Baxter about the story. And then he said, and then a few other pilot of his pilot friends, and they were like, "Oh, are you sure this wasn't military missiles or like a military craft?" And it's interesting because he went into the news station and then he told his story to this gentleman named Nolan Skiff. And then Nolan Skiff published a news report and had the title as Man Spots Flying Saucers in Washington, 9 flying saucers. And then that story gets forwarded to the Associated Press for worldwide distribution. And then the flying saucer narrative was born. But Arnold never said that the shape of the craft was flying saucers. He said that they moved like saucers skipping across water. He said that the shape of the craft was boomerang shaped, bat shaped, and sometimes he would say refer to it as a pie pan. And the news reporters misinterpreted his statements as the shape of the craft was a flying saucer, but it wasn't. And then Arnold came out with a drawing of the craft. And this is the most accurate depiction of what Kenneth Arnold saw in 1947. And you would think that whenever that photo came out, that it would stop all the flying saucer talk because Wayne, this doesn't look like a flying saucer to me. This does not look like the portrayed depiction of what people are led to believe that UFOs and flying saucers look like, does it? It looks like bat-shaped, boomerang-shaped craft. And then when you,
Looks Klingon to me, but that's just my feeling.
yeah, something straight out of Star Trek. But really, when you kind of look at it, hold on, let me find a photo that doesn't have Kenneth Arnold actually in the picture. Here it is. So, but when you look at it, it almost looks like a prototype or one of the first uh, prototypes of the B-2 stealth bomber. Looks very similar. I mean, it's more rounded, it's not as ragged, but if you looked up pictures of the B-2 stealth bomber, you could see if they were flying in a formation and Kenneth Arnold seeing these at a distance, that it could be mistaken for some exotic craft.
So and then it gets back to a question: are these actually visitors from other planets, or other systems? It's interesting because the narrative is this merely, well, I think the evidence is so overwhelming in one aspect that there's something going on. There is a phenomenon. Now, whether it is of this earth, whether it is of our technology, I question that, and because it gets into, are we really the ones in control here? But to continue on with so if the government has, I guess so. So where is the disinformation campaign coming? Is it to get us to not believe, or is it to get us to accept, or is it to keep us as basically constantly questioning?
I think it's a little bit of everything that you mentioned. It's a multifaceted campaign. You can, because you can use both sides, right? You can use the believers, the 100%. I want to believe believers, and you can use them, and then you can also use the skeptic side as well. And it's almost like politics, right? You got the left, you got the right, you got the extreme left, you got the extreme right, and it just creates division and confusion. And that's ultimately what deception operations really do, is to sow confusion, to
Okay.
confuse people to a level that they don't know what to believe. And not knowing what to believe is better for the intelligence communities than being on one side or the other.
So what's the end game here? Because everything has to have is obviously going to be concluded into an objective. And so I'm thinking in my head, all right, so what's the end game here? What's the purpose? But then the question immediately hits my mind, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, who's making money off this?
Hmm.
I mean, that anything to do does anything in the world today, it's got money associated to it. Someone is making a buck. Now who? And then why? I mean, you see where I'm coming from?
Well, it's really interesting because you can kind of, whenever you track back the term flying saucer, you'll see that flying saucer was a term that was being used 60 years before Kenneth Arnold sightings in 1880 by this gentleman named George Lewitsky. He created this term flying saucer uh, for these little clay pigeons. It was called trap shooting.
Yeah, I
And
do that all the, yeah.
originally trap shooting was with like live pigeons, but then whenever the animal cruelty became like popular, they didn't want to shoot live animals for target practice anymore, so they changed them into these little
Clay
clay
pigeons.
disc,
Yeah.
and they were called flying saucers. And the sport of, see, look at that, it looks like a
Busted
modern,
many of those.
yeah, a modern interpretation of what people believe that UFOs look like. And this sport was a very popular sport. It was adopted by the Olympics. It was 600,000 people by 1920 had all known the term flying saucer. Then before World War II, the military adopted the sport and the term flying
And well,
saucer
didn't the Germans have like three prototypes that they had made?
of UFOs or
Yeah,
of
flying saucers. I mean, they looked almost like your clay pigeons. What they call those? I'll think of it. But apparently that's what the Allies,
the Hanabu.
I believe so. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any. That's like the very speculatory and theory thing that they actually have the craft. I mean, because no one really got to see it up close and well, I'm sure people did, but they weren't able to come out and really talk about it. So it's like it's a kind of a theory and a speculation that they had craft. Now they did have the Glocka Bell technology, which required a bunch of energy and a bunch of electricity running to it, and it would put off a lot of radiation and it would let it like rise up off of the ground, which I've come to the conclusion that maybe that was like the engine or um, the thruster or the power source of the craft, and it was just like a component of the craft. And when the U.S. got to Germany and saw the Bell, they didn't have the rest of the craft to know what it even went to.
Well,
So
the backstory to that is that the Nazis still say that they got that knowledge because of their occult knowledge.
yeah, the forget what Marina Abramovic, no, Marina Orsanage was the lady that supposedly channeled entities on how to build one of these craft, and which then it goes back farther than that. It goes back to like John D.
Well, what about
Um,
the Hindu and their Varamas?
yeah, the well, the Japanese also had something similar to that as well. There's some drawings and some pictures of a really strange
I think it's in the
looking
Bhagavad
craft.
Gita that they actually talk about there was three different versions. There was one for heavy lift, there was another for people movers, and then the third one was designed for royalty.
Which then brings into the question, well, we have all these stories, but does that, you know, solidify it that it's extraterrestrial craft? To me, it doesn't.
Well, they can't
Because
be extraterrestrial. They were made here, so they would be terrestrial craft.
exactly. And then when you look at the crash retrieval buzzword, you think, oh, well, because when people think crash retrieval, they think, oh, well, it had to have happened in modern times. Someone had to have seen this craft fall out of the sky, or a military personnel saw it on radar, or another country called the United States and had them come excavate this craft in another country, some kind of exotic craft. And I'm like, well, that doesn't necessarily have to be true. Like, it doesn't matter how much time passes in between finding something.
Was the
And
Nuremberg painting of what is it, 1614, or I believe that shows some sort of freaking battle happening up in the sky. I mean, the artist caught it, and we know that there were people that were dying. I mean, that was an actual event captured. So it tells me, and you mentioned John D. So here's a crazy question. What if there is a group, let's say we can use the word elite, it's overused today, but what if there were a core group of humans that have had this knowledge passed down for thousands of years? The Sumerians, they had a craft. I mean, I studied the Bible extensively in the book of Zechariah 12. It talks about the what he saw as a carpet rolled up on two ends that described as two females piloting the craft. Now, yeah, I realize it has to do with the Old Testament, but still, yet, it tells me that what if there was a core group that have had this technology and have secretly perfected it over thousands of years? I mean, is that so off base?
no, it's not. And I think that that is a very plausible explanation for it. And
because
Again,
I'd want aliens to be part of the fall guy. I don't want them to think that they're fucking humans driving this. Hell no, we want the little gray dudes because they're never going to look at us. They'll never think of investigating where the potential, and someone I saw in the chat room said, you're right. Who's making money off of this? That's to me, I'm just a common guy. But that to me seems to be where well, the problem is you start looking into this, you may end up, well, like the guy for Boeing whistleblower.
yeah, when you follow the money, that's why I brought up the whole military basically taking over the flying saucer narrative and the sport of flying saucers to train their airmen before World War II, which is almost identically what has happened with ufology and disclosure now. The military and the three-letter organizations have basically hijacked this entire thing from the public, and they have taken it over. Right?
And here, I
It's
don't mean to sound rhetorical in this, but it's just got the feel of the Vatican on this. I mean, it's got that same feel that, because I don't know if and here's the thing, it seems to be more Western based technology than what we would consider Far Eastern technology. But I think about the Chinese, they've been here far longer than what we think Western esoteric knowledge has been.
Yeah, and there's a ESRI map of all the sightings and when all the sightings start that Dr. David Morehouse was talking to me about. Let me see if I can pull it up and screen share it really quickly because
I'd
it's
love
a
to see
very
it.
it's a uh very telling thing because it shows you when all of these sightings started, and they start around 1947, and it's primarily in the United States. It's all
Hmm.
basically in the United States, which is very interesting to me. Let me see if I can screen share. Oh, you
I
gotta,
smell a rat. Yeah, you can share it. Did I?
and
You don't need permission, do you?
yeah, you have to.
Oh, there we go. There you go.
Cool. All
Yeah, I
right.
smell a rat. A
Yes,
big
sir.
fat rat.
But it's just interesting how all of the sightings all basically happen in the United States. They all start right after World War II, and then it's just like propagated like that. Okay, here we go. Get the screen share, desktop one. All right, can you see this?
I can see it coming up. There we go.
Okay, so boom, like right now is when it starts lighting up, and that was around 19 late 40s. Now you see it getting bigger. This was probably around 80s. Now we're in around the 90s. And it's picking up.
Huh. There's a
And
pattern in it. This is the world.
this is the world right here. Look at how big the United States is. Look how lit up the United States is.
Something ain't right.
It's not right at all. At all. I mean, look at that. That's all the United States. That's it's basically completely lit up. Besides like the Midwest here, there's still a lot of reports and a lot of sightings through the Midwest, but look at the East Coast, look at the West Coast.
And then I
All
look
from
over here to England.
yeah,
England is lit up. Something's wrong here. I mean, there is something wrong here in just visually. You can see this in your mind. For my mind, I'm going, okay, so what the hell's going on?
yep,
That is weird. And look in China, virtually nothing.
nothing.
The other area I find very interesting is the Middle East.
Yep.
Look right in that area of Israel, Palestine, that that whole, huh?
Yep. Unbelievable, isn't it?
And
Whenever you see
look at Hawaii.
yep.
No, there's something wrong here.
There's definitely something wrong. And when I saw
So
the visual of this, I was like, what?
so what
Wow.
was the conclusion that the person who put this together, what they had to have drawn some conclusion. I mean, the that come on. You're telling me that this is natural? And look at it's really been the United States that has driven this complete narrative. And then as you were showing that, I'm thinking to myself, at the same time, this phenomenon is now intermixed with religion. It
Yep.
has direct religious connotations to it, military, I mean, deep state. Um, this this has got the feel of a takeover. This is conditioning. Takeovers sometimes take 100 years or more. This is conditioning. I was born in 55, and so I remember growing up in California watching the B-rated science fiction movies, of big saucers coming down, huge robots. And this is what permeated my generation and we just passed it forward.
And it's also wrapped into the new age spiritual beliefs, which really started with the I am cult in the early 30s with Guy and Edna Ballard that really took a lot of the uh, occult ideas of that time and formulated their own ideology and their own theology and their own belief systems, ripping off like Elena Blavatsky, Edgar Casey, and people, the occult writers of that time. And they propagated their own religious belief, and which had to do with Saint Germain and some form of extraterrestrials. And it's a compounding, it's a regurgitation, and it's done as it's a deception. And when you look at the Paul Benowitz story and the Paul Benowitz case in 1979, and you really dig into that thing, like your mind will just be completely changed on the entire subject. I mean, you can read the book Mirage Man. That's like a must read for anybody that's looked
That's
into
the
this stuff.
Barney and who was Betty Hill. Their abduction stories started the whole abduction genre, you know, aliens coming down. And as you were talking, and I'm connecting the dots in my head, and I'm going, you know, so I'm seeing this propagation in the United States. It's like this is not natural. And then you look at what's happened, what the United States has done, and then I'm thinking, well, was this the precursor of eventually to AI? I mean, this has got the feel of a takeover.
It does, and it's a fake takeover, and it's a hoax takeover, to make you believe that it's something that it's not. Whenever it's human intervention, it's humans that are doing it to humans. And I agree with you in that maybe it does have something to do with AI, because if you're looking to the skies and you're constantly in belief that it's extraterrestrials, then anything can be gotten away with, because they know for a fact that it's not extraterrestrials and has nothing to do with extraterrestrials. So whenever they've convinced the public that it is extraterrestrials, then they can do whatever they want.
David Very said that, and he says they only speak English, the ETs. That's what I always configure. So is English like this freaking universal language out there? I mean, it's a gutter language, and I'm thinking that, yeah, everyone in the universe speaks, even God speaks English.
That's right. That's another really interesting aspect of it too. It's like, and we can only communicate with like a certain percentage of the world. I mean, I know Google Translate has made it easier, but for the longest period of time, if you only know one language, you're only communicating with maybe 10% of the entire world. Like that's mind blowing that we just can't go and communicate with whoever we want to communicate because they speak a different language. It's
Yeah.
really wild. We're getting robbed of a lot of experiences, and that's a big reason why I did that show on Japan and learning about with Lorenzo, learning about the culture of Japan because we don't get really any information on any other countries when it comes to the way that they live or the way that their government operates or their daily lives, right? We only get information on other countries when it's like bad and like horrible news or there's like a bombing or there's a natural disaster or something along the lines of that or an assassination or whatever. We don't really learn about what other countries are doing on like a daily basis. So that was a really eye-opening conversation for me and how Japan operates and the kindness and respect that they have for one another and their culture. He was saying that people will take naps in the park for hours at a time. They'll just leave their stuff in the park and then come back a day later and it's all still there. You can never do that anywhere in the United States, ever. You know?
No. And so I'm continually drawn back, Ryder, on the whole thing though of there's it and then and that graph was very telling. So who's looking into the investigation? Who would you say, and I'm seeing your guests coming on, are they part of exposing? Do they know what this agenda is? Do they know? It seems very complex, very sophisticated. And the vast majority of people, I, it's above them. They don't want to stop and think about this, because the attitude is, well, what can I do about it? Actually, I think you could probably do a lot, but then again, I don't know.
Yeah, this should be an entire documentary series
You should do one.
going into this whole thing because it's I personally believe that it's one of the biggest deceptions in modern times in modern history. And it's once you peel back the layers, you realize you know what's going on, and that doesn't really stop the questions. It's like what you were asking earlier. Well, why why are they doing this? Why are they spreading all this deception around UFOs and extraterrestrials? And one of those conclusions is because it's our technology and they don't want other people to know that it's our technology, and it's gotten so far out of hand that there's no putting a lid on it anymore. They did all the disinformation surrounding Paul Benowitz. They broke into Paul Benowitz's house, replaced his computer with an NSA modified computer to make him believe that he was in contact with extraterrestrials. And then he went out and told a lot of the researchers and a lot of the ufologists of that time in the 70s, 80s, and in the 90s the myths and disinformation that the NSA was giving him that he didn't know was a deception. He thought that it was extraterrestrials. And almost everything within the mythology of extraterrestrials can be tracked back to Paul Benowitz in 1979 from the Air Force special investigation investigators, solidifying his preconceived notions that it's extraterrestrials. The NSA feeding him false and mis and dis and information surrounding extraterrestrials. A lot of things came up out of that. The contract with ETs and with Dwight Eisenhower came out of that. The extraterrestrials are here for our resources, and that they're the ones that are abducting us came out of that. The Dulce, the Duluth
Yeah, down in New
base
Mexico. Yeah.
in New Mexico came out of the Paul Benowitz story. So, and it's all mis and disinformation from NSA agents and Air Force Office of Special Investigators. And they knew that at some point he was going to go out and talk to all these UFO researchers like John Lear, Bill Cooper, Bill Moore, Linda Moulton Howe, and all of these people, and was going to spread that, and it just took on a life of its own. And that's why they more than likely they were silent on it for like 30 or 40 years, because they just let the public roll with it and keep propagating it. And then all these UFO conferences come up and start popping up, and all these people are paying all this money to go hear these UFO researchers and these people talk about this stuff, and they just let it simmer. And they were like, holy, I guarantee you somebody in the intelligence community sat back and was like, what have we done? What have
Yeah,
we done?
because it seems like this is like a virus. I mean, you can create this unique virus in a lab, and within its environment that it was created in, it remains neutral, but you put it into a foreign environment, now you got a problem. Much like this is a mind virus. So to what end is this heading towards? Because as I look at humanity today, there is this mitosis, mitosis, yeah, we go, that is metastasized on us. We are a species that, it's just me, but I think we're losing it more and more each day, and we're running towards this. Now, does this play a role in that? Is there going to be something like Project Bluebeam? Are we going to wake up and start seeing these images in the sky swearing that these are ships, that these are actually extraterrestrial ships, when in fact they're a manipulation of light, that someone is using? Or are they real? I mean, this is where it becomes an issue, because it can literally drive a species nuts.
And that's what happened to Paul Benowitz. It turned him pretty much crazy. He had to be psychiatrically hospitalized over this whole ordeal. And the fake alien invasion is already here. It's like what I was talking about in the beginning
Yeah,
of
it's
this
here, all
show.
right.
It's already here, and it's been here, and it's just been wide open, right?
So let me
And
ask
and
you,
and
go
they're
ahead.
just a couple hundred miles
Yeah,
south,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Does that not make more sense than because even when you look at the word extraterrestrial and you break down the word extraterrestrial, it just means other land,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. Doesn't
What
say
is
anything about outer space.
what is south of the United States? What is north of the United States?
Yeah.
Other land.
I keep on looking at this, and then I always put the esoteric spin to it, because to me, it's about control. This is what our species, Homo sapiens, seem to have their great flaw as to our predecessors, the Neanderthals, Cro-Magnons, etc., that we seem to be prone to manipulation and control. It seems like that's what we want the most, is our lives to be controlled. We want to know what time we should get up. We want to know what time we should eat, what time we should go to work, school. Everything is planned for us from the moment we enter into this realm. And with that, we have the sense of being. Now you come in and disrupt that and say, but that's meaningless. For what time you should be getting up to what time you should be eating, it should be your decision, not the general out there. And I keep thinking that there has to be an end game. So what is it? Is it really control, or is there something more nefarious going on here?
Again, I think that it's kind of all the above, because I believe that it got completely out of control and they kind of just started scrambling for how to use it in their benefit. That's why it took them so long
So is this
to
of
come
a
out and say, "Oh, well, yeah, UFOs and UAPs." Turns out that we're confirming it now. It took them a long time to figure out their angle on it, because they didn't realize how quickly that the deception operation was going to take off and spread around to other people in the community. They didn't real. I 100% believe that they did not think that it was going to be this popular. I
So let me
do
ask
not.
you, do you think when I studied angelology, angels under Lester Summerall, this goes back decades and decades ago, it was accepted that there were different classes of angels, and some had the ability that they could move through space time, but there was the lower class that actually had what we would call vehicles. They had ships, which we would use in modern terminology. So, my question, just throwing it out there from what you've had, is this of a technology of a different class of beings that we somehow worship? It's involved in our occultism, it's involved in our paganism. Is this what we're seeing? Is this a form of what you could read in the Bible or the Quran or any other book out there, that these unseen beings, these invisible beings that travel through the sky on chariots of fire, that's what the Old Testament saints saw them as. Is this what we're dealing with? And while you were talking, I kept on coming up with this whole structure of what spheres are. And part of my biblical training was to understanding, and now we know it from a science, this firmament. There is this thing called the firmament where there is a host. This is where these beings exist in.
Yeah. Yeah, the Kordylewski cloud, which is around the Earth, that's full of plasma.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, when you think of like ancient times and these people seeing these types of sightings, I still go back to a slightly more advanced species of being that was here while a lower society was also here. And that explains how they had craft. And because it was a slightly more, I mean, if you had an airplane back 3,000 years ago, people are going to be like, what is this? What's happening? What magic is this? They're witches. Let's burn them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it,
And the
it
sound would be like the sound of locusts.
which is the thrusters
Exactly.
of the jet, right? And that makes because if it's just a slightly more advanced society that, let's say, it's not even anti-gravity, it's just like what the public has, like airplanes and stuff. Well, the people back then, it would have been magic. It would have been this incredible technology that no one had ever seen before. And that's probably why it was described as like being on fire and looking like a chariot and all that, because
That's,
it's
yeah, yeah.
going through the sky. And I'm sure some of them had problems. I'm sure some of them caught on fire, you know. So
Crashed.
yeah, and crashed. And I think that a lot of that is back to the archaeological aspect of this. You go back, if we went to the Middle East right now and we did an archaeological dig and we found something that was some kind of advanced technology that we don't know what it is, that's going to be a crash retrieval. Doesn't matter how much period of time has passed in between the thing, you finding the thing, and now it could be hundreds, it could be thousands of years old. It's still going to be a crash retrieval. So that's
Yeah.
the double meaning of the word crash retrieval, and everyone loves to bring that word up, like it's crashed extraterrestrial craft. Well, not necessarily. It could be craft that from our ancient past that we dug up in modern times, but they're still calling it a crash retrieval because it still is a crash retrieval.
Oh, this has got, when you start applying this, because there has to be a reason. Again, if these beings have the ability to transcend space, miles, then it's beyond our capacity to think of. But I just don't see biological beings do it. the whole idea of space travel itself, the impossibility is, and the fact is, I don't think humans will ever be out in space. We can't figure out between here and Mars. The concern is that with the intensity of the cosmic radiation, it's going to drive the astronauts nuts before they get there. We also don't know how fast the DNA begins to become damaged to the point that it's irreversible in altering the DNA of the individual person in that environment. So, if these beings have figured all that out and how they can move at such speeds and what have you, then that tells me that the earth is unique within itself, that whoever has or thinks they have possession of it, wow, I mean, you could use technology and befuddle the masses forever. I mean, if we have a civilization collapse, let's say we're the seventh civilization, and they say we're going to be collapsing, that's just where we're heading. The next one behind us will find the artifacts of our jets, our everything else. Would those governments then say to the masses, well, because if we admit that it existed and then we found it and it was, before we were here, well, we can't do that because then we're powerless.
Yep.
Oh, I can see where, this really starts fucking with your mind.
Yep, that's exactly right. That's been my goal and my point of talking about, the way that things last. Because if, say, we're all wiped out right now, like just everyone just vanishes from the earth, how long would it take for the things that we build, our buildings, our cars, and all that to, excuse me, to corrode and no longer be here? Would it take, 200 years? Would it take 300 years, 400 years? And then, well, let's say a new species of humans in the future, uh, 500 years, and then they start doing excavations, and then they find remnants of our old society. What would they say about that? Would they
Bingo.
be like, oh man, this was such a highly advanced society, and all the while they're like 100 times more advanced? You know what I mean? Like, what would they say about what we have now? Would they be like, oh, this was a very primitive society. They were living in caves, and you know what I mean? Like,
Or we would become the Atlantis story.
yeah.
These people, they had a society where it seemed like things, it's so interesting. And, the History Channel did a program on that it showed in less than 300 years, our cities are gone. They have crumbled. Nature has taken it. The plant life have literally consumed those things. And within 400 years, they showed there's virtually little evidence of us being here at all. Our trash will eventually, be degraded to the point where the earth will either be able to regenerate it, or it will become these artifacts that sometimes we find in other parts of the world. It's interesting.
Then that brings into the question: how many times has this
Hmm.
been done before? How many times have we been to this exact point that we're at right now within our past? If that's all it takes is 300 years for everything to be gone, then what version of humanity are we on right now? Because a lot of people a lot of people think, well, it would take a really, really long time. There's no way that everything that we have built, I mean, the things that we've built are super flimsy. I mean, the structures that we built. When we were flying to California to film this second documentary, I'm like looking out the plane window, and it's wild, Wayne, like looking down at the cities, and I'm like, this is the most ugliest type of architecture, and like everything's like laid out in squares, like on a grid. It's really strange. It's really weird looking at how ugly things are from the top. And everything's like it's perfect squares, just
Yeah.
like everywhere. It's like perfect little chunks of squares, just all over the place. And I'm like, one, how did we get it this perfect? Like, who was the brainchild behind creating a lot of these cities and the layouts of these cities? And two, why did we make it so freaking ugly? Like, why did we not have some creativity on designing and creating these cities? You know, everything is squares. It's just squares. You live in a square house, you stay in a square room, above it's square. Like, why is
Because
it
you
all
can't have a
square?
because you can't have a square circle. Oh,
Well,
Ryder, man.
do something different though. Make a triangle, make an octagon, make a freaking obtuse angle or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, do have fun. Like, create something that's enjoyable to see or like enjoyable to look at. That's what I feel like that they were definitely doing in ancient times. You know, with the cathedrals. You know, with the pyramids. Like, I
Yeah,
want to know the first person that thought about, oh, like, let's make a giant freaking pyramid. Let's just put a pyramid. You know what this area needs? A giant freaking pyramid.
yeah.
You know, let's take million ton blocks and we'll make this giant freaking pyramid.
And then what do you
Probably
do with it after it's built? Now what the hell do we do with it? I ain't tearing it down. Hell no. Well, right at that hour went by. How can people find you? Let them know. I put your link down, by the way, for your YouTube channel, but you're out there in a lot of different platforms.
Thank you very much, Wayne. Appreciate it. Yeah, YouTube Raised by Giants, any and all alternative video platforms, and any podcast platforms as well. There's an audio only version of my show that also gets uploaded to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and anywhere else that you can listen to podcast on. And thanks very much, Wayne. Really appreciate your time this evening. Wonderful conversation. And
That's fantastic. I mean, I'm sitting here, I got freaking notes everywhere because it's really, if we could find the reason for all this, I think all the rest of the pieces start falling in very succinctly.
well, Wayne, help me fund a documentary, and we'll get that bad boy
We
on
can do
Netflix.
that.
We'll do like a
Mm.
four part UFO documentary because
All
I
right, we'll look into that.
100% believe that this is a huge deal. And I think if people were to see the evidence and everything, they would be like, holy crap. And maybe I think it's something that's really needed right now at this time because UFOs and aliens are at the height of popularity.
They're
And
going
I
to
think
use it too. They're going to use it. I
uh,
have no doubt about it.
but it's like perfect timing for like a Peacock docu series or a Netflix docu series. Netflix has been putting out some really good documentaries here recently. They just did, which I'm going to be talking about this evening with Shane the
Yeah, you got a
Ruiner.
show tonight. Who do you have with your guest?
Shane the Ruiner. We're going to be talking about this new documentary that just came out on Netflix called "The Programs, Cults, Cons, and Kidnapping."
Ooh,
Unbelievable, Wayne. If you get a chance, like watch this documentary. It's a three-part documentary. It was like in the top 10 on Netflix. And Netflix also came out with another documentary called American Conspiracy. You want to go down a rabbit hole with this whole thing. It's called the American Conspiracy, the Octopus Murders. Oh my God. That is, I couldn't believe that
check that.
Netflix did it. I was like, holy crap, they're really talking about this on Netflix, but that is a wild story, and it's called the Octopus Murders for a reason, and it goes around corruption, and it's right up your alley though, Wayne, because it has everything to do with computer programming and computer engineering and the Department of Justice not paying this gentleman and then stealing the software and then putting a backdoor into that software and then selling that software to other countries' intelligence communities so that they can spy on them. It's like they created a giant global surveillance in
See, and
the
they're using that for someone. Yeah, thank you, Nina. Hey, Nina, thank you, darling, and all the rest of everybody. Ryder, we got to do this again because it's got my hunger. I have a special guest tomorrow. I have Jay and April from Spiritual Raw. We're going to be making an announcement tomorrow. And this is something that I'll talk to you a little bit more off once we get off here. But wow, octopus murders. I'm going to have to check this thing out now. I mean,
Watch that one. You're gonna love it, Wayne. I was like mind blown. I was like,
uh, uh,
holy
uh.
crap. This was happening in the late 80s into the 90s. Like, what are they doing now? Holy crap.
Exactly. Exactly. Some 40 years later.
Yeah.
Ay, ay, ay. All right. Much love, everybody. Thank you all. I'll see you tomorrow again with Jay and April coming on. So you're going to like this. So much love, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow. Speak in favor over us all. Ryder, thank you, brother. Man, this is good stuff all the way around. All right. Much love, everyone. Till we see you again.